I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie. Thanks for joining me once again on my channel on data engineering. In my last episode on Azure connectivity, we created a simple database with a single username and password that was usable throughout the application that allowed you to get your application in Microsoft Access completely online, that you could give the copy of your file to anybody and they could look at it. And they could do updates and all kinds of stuff and work in your application. But some of you guys are going, well, my application is quite a bit more complex than that, and I need to take advantage of some serious security, and so I need to have user level security and all that kind of stuff. And so in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up your application on Azure so that you can use any of the Microsoft logins, whether it's somebody at another company, or if it's a personal login that was made on live.com, and we're going to make it so that your application can authenticate using Microsoft's secure sign-on, and then use your database, and you know exactly who it is that's using the database, and you can have a fine control over if they can read or write, or maybe a read only. And actually, once you get into this mode, you can have a very fine tuning of control. You can even, it's basically SQL Server, the type of security that you get on SQL Server, where you can grant select on specific things. You can even make it so that people can only insert into tables and they can't select and stuff like that. So without further ado, let's get to our Azure Active Directory with Microsoft Access. Need help or coaching on your project? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. Okay, so we're in our Azure portal and we're going to click on Azure Active Directory. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite a user. It could be a user anywhere that has a Microsoft login. It might be a personal, like live.com login, or a company. You could put company users on, because if they have Microsoft logins as well. And what we'll do is we're going to put our name in there. In this case, this is an email that I have that has a live login, but it's not one that I use very often at current. So that billzone.com, that's actually a personal email that I just set up. And so you can go through and you can do things like block sign in and stuff like that. So that's where you can do that. And then you hit invite, and then that sends an email to the selected user that has a Microsoft login that they can accept it and all that kind of fun stuff. And so that's kind of like the first step of what we're doing. So what I've done here is I've opened the file that we created last time in our last Azure SQL episode, where we created a single username and password database and connection that we could use. And I used 13, and note I've changed it to 17 for the version number there. But we created a username and password in Azure using SQL Server Security, and that allowed us to create a file that if everybody had the same password, they could use it from all around the globe on the internet. And this procedure here would link the tables for them so that they could start to use the Azure SQL tables. And so here we have, there's a person table, like you can see in the background. There's a project table that we linked, and then a project time table, and then that we linked, and then we created a form based off of all those just to demonstrate, simple connectivity, how you might create your app. And so when we hit run on this procedure, it would link all the tables for us using that connection string, and that's exactly what we did there. So if I go back and I delete these, if I just delete these links that I created, so note these are linked tables, and so these don't hold any data in them. They're just links to a database table that is out in the internet on Azure. And so now if I hit run on this form here, it's going to go ahead and recreate all those tables that that you saw, And so they're just table links, but in Microsoft Access, the beautiful thing is these tables operate almost identically to Access tables. And so that makes using the methods and ways that you create your applications that you've been using all this time, you can use the same techniques and everything to create your new database on Azure, and it will be completely like online, which is awesome. So now if I close and reopen that Access file, it does not save the password and connection credentials in the file. So now if I double click it, it says, hey, who are you? How can we connect to this server to get to use these tables? And we could use SQL Server and then just punch in that username and password that you saw in the connection string just a few minutes ago there, and that would allow us to use this because this is using mixed mode security, so it has a SQL Server login as well as using Active Directory. But in this case, we're going to use the Active Directory interactive login, and you'll see now it says, oh hey, I know that this is already looking at project timesheets database, and if I hit connect, you'll see it starts my browser, and now it's going, hey, this is a real Microsoft login. You need to log in. You need to, sign in. And if there's multi-factor authentication enabled on your account, then your phone will get a beep and you'll have to approve it. And now you can see we've gotten one step closer, but you can see when I double clicked on the person table there, I can't actually see anything. I'm connecting to the server, but if I click on there, my select is being denied. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back into Azure again, and I'm going to click on my database, and as you can see there's a resource group and everything there, and I'm going to click on the server because the server is what we want to look at, and that Active Directory admin, you got to make sure that you set that to your login on that you're managing Azure with, and that's going to enable us to use these logins. So as you can see, we're still being denied select on that table, but now what we can do is we can go and we can, first of all, we're going to use the create user statement that's going to create the user billzone.com in our project timesheets database, and then we're going to add a couple roles to it, and this is sort of a very simple security where we can say, hey, you know what, this user is trusted and they can take the data reader role, and so now this is a read only. I can look at the tables in here just like we did before. I can open up the tables and I can see all the data in them, and the data reader role on that database will allow you to do that. But if I want to go ahead and try to make some changes, guess what? There we go. Our updates permission was denied, and so basically this stops us from doing any kind of updates to tables. So if you want a read-only database for your customers or for people using your database, you only need to set the data reader role member. But if you want to have the data writer, which allows users to input data and make changes and things, then we'll add the data writer role. And I'm actually using a bit older syntax here on this, the SP_add role member. I think that's been deprecated, but anyway, you can still use those in Azure. And now you can see I can open up the tables just like I did there, and I can put in a bunch of data into a field, and you can see that it saves it, and that's exactly what we want to see there. And what we did last time in our project is we created this little form that had worked with 3 tables. That was sort of like a time entry form, and we demonstrated that we can use these DAO we can use DAO on these linked tables, and it works almost identically to how it works on native access tables. So if you're converting a database, it's actually quite simple. There's only a few little changes you need to make, and that's really going to make it great for you when you're converting your application. So if you want to see your current connection string in your tables for your connection, you can do it by choosing a table, a linked table, and using connect there, just like I did in in our immediate window, and that will return back whatever is currently being used. So I was checking there to see that it was version 17 of the SQL Server driver, and that allows us to use these Azure databases as well. So now if I close and reopen our database, you can see that we can log in just like we did. I open it and then I go directly to our form instead, like you might have an auto open or have this set as the opening form, and users will be prompted for their login, in which case they'll put in whatever it is that they're using. It could be their company login or whatever. They'll punch that in, and they'll go okay, and then you go through the process of authenticating through Microsoft, so that you know who it is that is accessing your database, and you can see that it opens just fine, and it operates almost like it was working with access tables. It looks exactly the same. So there's your drop downs and everything, and you can create new rows and make changes and all kinds of stuff, and that's exactly what we want to see. And if you wanted to reduce the security on somebody in this particular case, you could go back to your your database in your SQL Server Management Studio here, and you could either go into security. So if you don't want to do it using code, you can add a new user. If you wanted to add a new user, it'll start the script for you. If you wanted to, you could delete that Sean@billzone.com user, or whatever, or you can do it by query, which I like to use store procedure, just because you can use it again and do the exact same thing if you write it into a script. So in this case, I'll drop a user from the data writer role, for example. So you can use sp drop role member, and that'll reduce basically the access of that particular Active Directory user. And so now if I go back to access and I close that form and reopen it, I think it actually works even in mid. If I type in here and I try to make a change, you'll see that it actually said, no, you can't update that because you don't have write permissions anymore on this database. And you can actually change it while the users are in there, and it will stop halfway, if they're, go to another record in the same form. If it's changed in the meantime, it will actually stop them right there. So now I'll say add role, and I won't even change, I won't close or open the form, and I'll just go, hey, I'm gonna, make some changes to this record here, and if I scroll off of that record, you'll see that it did save it, and so that's a very simple way. That's a very broad using DB, using the writer and the reader roles. For most people, that's all that they need, and then you can control a lot of stuff inside of your application. But for other people, if you're interested, you can go much more deeply, and you can grant select only or insert only, and so people can't see data and all kinds of stuff. So that's something to look at. Okay, so how can I see who's using the app, and control their selections, maybe their menus, or depending on how you built your application or whatever. And what I'll do is I'll give a very simple way of finding the system user for a particular connection, and that's by using select system user as sysuser. Now you could just execute that as a pass-through query, and that's one way to get it. Or in this case, you could create a view, is what I did, and it returns, it returns basically the username of the person who's using the database, because it sort of grabs the system user. And so in this case, if I go select star from my current user, because I'm in SQL Server Management Studio as my, my info at MacKenzieMacKenzie.com login, it returns that value there, and you can see that it is sort of allows you to return that. So that's great. So now, if we went back to our module and we added one more table to our transfer database statements where we we link up tables, then we can add that the view, because this is a good thing for you to remember, is that views are available as tables, as linked tables in Microsoft Access. And so in this case, it's a very simple view. It's just looking up the current user. But if you have like a really slow query in Access that's in your app, and you can, if you move it to SQL Server and then just make a linked table on it, it's going to be like 10 times as fast. So so now you can see, if I go, and I'm just going to delete all of our table links again, and now what I'll do is I'll grab our procedure here that we created that just links all 4 tables, and I hit go, and you can see here it asks me what's the unique identifier, and I'll just say that's the sysuser field. And so now that procedure ran, and now we should have all 4 of those tables in our well, 3 tables and a view, but they show up as 4 linked tables. And if I double click that my current user table, you can see now it's like, oh, okay, Sean at billzone.com with, it says live.com hash. So it splits the provider, I guess, and the username using a hash. So you could split those, and check out my video on how to split, how to use split. But you could split those or whatever, And so if I close and reopen the app, now if I open our form and I log in again, then you can see I'll grab the interactive login again, and I'll hit OK and go through the use the authentication from Microsoft.com there. And now you can see it opens the app, and all my data is there. But if I open my current user, you can see that it shows the username. So we could actually use that. Now you could say, you could have your own table that says if it's this user, then they can have these selections or can go in these screens. You can do all your application level security based off of the username. But if we wanted to just show that in, say, on our form, then we could do that too. So, if I grabbed a text box here and throw it onto the form header, and I could grab that and maybe move it down by the work comment there, use some of that real estate or whatever, and I'll just drag that down there, and extend it so that it's long enough to put the full username in. And then we could say equals DLOOKUP, and we don't even need to put a where clause in, because there's only one record in that view. We know that. So we'll say DLOOKUP sysuser from my current user, which is a view, a linked table on a view, and I could even put in welcome, and our expression. And so that's really cool. So make that a bit bigger, and now you could you can do things like you can open it up and it says, hey, welcome live.com, Sean at billzone.com, and you could, like I said, you could split that and just show the username, or you could link it to another table and just show the the user's proper name or something like that. But you can find out, and who's using this connection through using that method. Looking for more programmers for your project? Make sure to check out the additional links in the description. Hope you enjoyed today's discussion on how to use Azure Active Directory with your Microsoft Access application. If you like what you saw today, please make sure to give the video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet. Click the bell when you see the bell, and if you have any questions or comments, please put those in the comment section below. Have a great day, have a safe day, and I'll catch you next time.